So let's first talk about empathy. What it is, a bit of neuroscience behind it, because you know me, I love my neuroscience, and how it shapes our interactions with others. Then we'll maybe try to tease out the differences, which are sometimes subtle, between being sensitive to our environment, being very empathetic or sympathetic, and what being an empath, in quotes, actually means. And I want to be clear too that as far as I could find in my research, empath is more of a metaphysical term than a psychological diagnosis, although there are some clinicians who feel that it is a valid experience and concept. Do you ever notice how some people's energy can light you up and others can drain you dry in about 5 seconds flat? We live in a world with all kinds of different people in it. Some are upbeat most of the time and fun to be around. Some are more, somber, and you just feel a quiet peace when you're around them. Some are kind and caring, usually trying to be considerate of others. Some, not so much. And I think most of us are able to kind of feel the vibe of the people around us, and we respond on an emotional level to that vibe. We have the ability to understand and share the feelings of other people around us. We recognize some basic behavior and body language cues and respond to them in kind, or someone tells us something sad they're going through and we can sort of put ourselves in their shoes and feel sad with them too. We call that empathy, and it's just part of being a caring human for most of us. But today, I want to take the conversation a little deeper. I want to get into why having empathy for others and being sensitive to other people's moods and emotions doesn't mean we have to be a doormat. Because I think it's super important to be that caring human, but it's also important not to carry around other people's emotional baggage with us as we move through our life or even our day. So this week, we're going to dive into empathy. Let's dig into that. You know how life throws us curveballs? Nobody gets through this journey of life without a few storms. Welcome to Transformative Journeys. I'm your host, Johanna LaRue. Each week, I'll share my thoughts and insights and dig into strategies that can empower you to rediscover yourself, learn about transforming pain into power, building confidence to navigate life's challenges, and cultivating a life of meaning and joy. Join me on this journey of exploration and transformation. Welcome back to Transformative Journeys with Johanna. And of course, this is Johanna. So a few weeks ago, I was talking to a really good work friend of mine, someone I care deeply about and who's really struggling with some toxicity that's going on at our workplace. Directed at her particularly from one individual, but there's a bit of a tag team dynamic that's involves another person as well. Anyways, without getting into any of the details of the situation, suffice it to say that it is deeply distressing to my friend. She's very sensitive to how the behaviors and the whole situation make her feel, and we've actually talked at length a number of times about it. But this particular conversation struck me as one that I thought might be an important one to explore here on the podcast. In this conversation, she said she believes she's so strongly impacted by the situation and the behaviors because she thinks that she's an empath. And it really got me thinking, because I'll be honest, the word gets thrown around a lot, sometimes in ways that I think are simply or oversimplified and muddy the waters instead of helping us understand what's really going on. I kind of think that telling ourselves, I must be an empath, that's why this gets to me, or I'm just empathetic, is often used as an excuse for letting the shitty behavior of others slide and of not doing the internal work to try and protect ourselves from the impact it has on us, or even of calling out the behavior and demanding something better. So I've literally been stewing on how to approach this for weeks, wondering how widespread the belief that our innate empathy for others and our own emotional reaction to stuff means someone's an empath. Wondering how accepting or being tolerant of people's bad behavior directed at us we become because of that belief, and trying to figure out how I can help people understand the difference, but more importantly, navigate the distinctions and begin to build healthy boundaries or emotional skills to help them deal with our responses to situations, events, or people who just leave us with a bad taste in our mouths. So let's first talk about empathy, what it is, a bit of neuroscience behind it, because you know me, I love my neuroscience, and how it shapes our interactions with others. Then we'll maybe try to tease out the differences, which are sometimes subtle, between being sensitive to our environment, being very empathetic or sympathetic, and what being an empath, in quotes, actually means. And I want to be clear too that as far as I could find in my research, empath is more of a metaphysical term than a psychological diagnosis, although there are some clinicians who feel that it is a valid experience and concept. So empathy is the neural wiring in our brains that helps us connect with each other. It's what allows us to understand what someone else is feeling, and it gets triggered by things like seeing the expression on someone's face or their body language, the tone of voice they're using, or just them telling us something. And the science says that there are a few different types of empathy. There's something called cognitive empathy, which is when we can understand what someone else is going through, like when a friend tells you about a breakup or a death in their family, and you understand their pain, even if you don't actually feel the pain yourself. There's affective empathy, which is when you feel the vibe of that friend's sadness with them. Their tears may trigger tears for you, or if the experience is a happy one, their joy makes you smile too. And then there's something called somatic empathy, which is really interesting. It's where your body literally mirrors what someone else is feeling. Like when you see someone bang their funny bone and you wince and grab your elbow too. I just grabbed my elbow. So why does this happen? Let's dig into a little bit of my favorite thing, neuroscience, to see if we can explain why some of this happens. We have a little group of neurons in our brains called mirror neurons, and they actually fire not just when you do or experience something, but also when you see someone else doing it or experiencing it. And this system is part of what helps us learn, connect with others, and literally mirror people's emotions. And it works together with our limbic system, the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, as this lightning fast emotional radar system that picks up on those visual or auditory cues and reacts almost instantaneously. That's why we feel an emotion before our brain can actually identify and name it. And I talked a little bit about that in last week's episode. Empathy isn't rare. It's not a magical sixth sense that only certain people feel. It's actually a normal brain-based process that's hardwired into most of us to help us build relationships, and it was critical to our survival as a species, as humans. And yes, there are exceptions, but I'm not getting into that, ist territory, the psychiatrists, psychologists, scientists. That's not my lane. So empathy itself is pretty much a human baseline. And just because you notice someone else's mood or feel tension in a room and it upsets you or makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean you're an empath. That's your brain doing its job. That's empathy. So now let's dive into the term empath, because like I said, I think the distinction deserves special attention. And here's some of what might be considered woo-woo comes in, and where it's important to separate the buzzword from the psychology and the science. The term is primarily used in, let's say, spiritual contexts or by social media influencers, and isn't an actual official psychological term, although Dr. Judith Orloff refers to it in a clinical context in her book. So being what is called an empath goes way deeper than being able to read the room or being or upset or hurt because your coworker or someone in your friend circle has been a dick. Empaths are thought to feel the emotions of others on an incredibly distinct and deep level. They don't just notice a bad mood or a disrespectful tone of voice or a dirty look and feel uncomfortable or pissed off about it. They're often able to pick up on unspoken and unexpressed feelings, and they feel the emotion of the other person in their own body as if it were their own. It's often described as feeling like they are physically and emotionally absorbing what other people are feeling instead of just being aware that a situation is emotionally charged. The tight chest of someone in emotional pain, the frustration or anger of a person near them, the mood of someone who's distressed, and of walking away carrying the heaviness of those emotions even hours later. According to Psychology Today, being an empath is considered a much more intense and sometimes overwhelming experience, often leaving the person feeling physically drained after being around someone who's experiencing sadness, anxiety, or even joy. So feeling unsettled because someone around you is grumpy, that's empathy. And it's a skill most of us have in varying degrees. Feeling wrecked with them and struggling to shake off that specific emotion, that's more aligned with empath territory. And although neuroscience is still researching the link, current research on mirror neurons suggests that some people may actually be more prone to experiencing that. So before we go into some strategies to help and support my highly sensitive or empathetic listeners in protecting themselves from other people's negative behavior or emotions, just generally cope with what happens when you're dealing with a toxic environment, here's something I found fun and fascinating when I started digging into this. The term empath, remember I said it isn't an official psychological term? It actually first showed up in a science fiction story by someone called J.T. McIntosh in 1956, and it was called The Empath. And from there, pop culture grabbed it like the last Twinkie in the box and ran with it, including an episode of Star Trek in the late 60s about a healing empath character, in a book called Vaster Than Empires and More Slow by Ursula K. Le Guin in the early 70s, and even in Marvel Comics in the 80s, where a character literally called Empath turned up. And it wasn't until the 1980s that the word even began showing up in psychological discussions. And even then, it wasn't, and still isn't, an official clinical term. At best, it's been used as a descriptive label for people with strong empathetic ability. So when someone says, I'm an empath, they're using a word that started in fiction, got boosted by pop culture, and only later drifted into the wellness and psychology spaces. And that doesn't mean that the experience of absorbing other people's energies or emotions isn't real, but the term itself has more roots in sci-fi and spirituality than it does in science at this point. So, taking for granted that we believe that some people could be empaths, and I actually do, here's the million-dollar question. Am I empathetic or an empath? So I've done a little scouting around to come up with some quick questions you can ask yourself. So the first one is, are you noticing or are you absorbing? Do you notice when someone is upset or grumpy? Or do you seem to feel what they're actually feeling, absorbing it and carrying it with you like it's your own? When you feel something, is it a general feeling or is it emotions? Are you reading the room, feeling general tension or upset? Or do you pick up on other people's actual emotions, like knowing when someone is anxious or feeling when they're sad? Does it happen more one-to-one or does it happen all the time? Do you only get triggered or, feeling anxious or upset when specific individuals treat you badly, or do you regularly feel flooded by other people's emotions, even strangers or people you aren't directly interacting with? And then let's do an accuracy check. When you sense someone's emotional state, do you actually get it right most of the time? Or do you mostly just react to how they treat you? And then recovery time. Can you shake off someone else's bad mood fairly quickly once you're away from them? Or does it stick to you for hours or even days, even when you know it isn't yours to carry? And then the final one is around physical overload. Do crowded rooms or high energy environments sometimes overwhelm you because you feel everything that's happening around you? Or are you usually fine unless someone directs negativity at you personally? If you mostly answered the first option in each pair, you're probably an empathetic person, which is wonderful and human. If you often answered the second option, you might be more in line with what is considered an empath. And the difference does matter, because if you mislabel empathy as being an empath, you might excuse bad behavior instead of addressing it, or carry weight around that was never yours to hold. Being empathetic means that you care and you connect. Being an empath means you deeply absorb others' emotions, which actually requires special boundaries and self-care. Both are human. Both, I think, are real, but they're not the same. And here's the part I want everyone listening who relates to really hear. You don't need to label yourself as an empath to validate the fact that being mistreated hurts. You don't have to carry a mystical identity to justify why disrespect bothers you. It's enough to simply say, that was unkind and I deserve better. And one last thing before we get into some tools and strategies, I want you to remember that it's not your job to pre-feel every feeling someone might have about you. That's not empathy. That's something called anticipatory guilt. And that's a different thing. Boundaries and self-care can be hard. Most of us feel like we have too much to do and too little time, and that adding one more thing to our day is just asking too much. I've got tools for that. Tools that won't overwhelm, and even some that you can use while you're already doing what you already do. The Essential Self-Care Toolkit is my free guide for sneaking in some self-care when you don't feel like you can take on one more thing. And my Mindfulness Anywhere Toolkit is full of practical ways to turn the things you already do every day into moments of mindfulness. Grab them free at transformativejourneys.ca or just scroll down to the link in the show notes. So, whether you're empathetic or you lean more towards empath territory, the truth is the same. Other people's emotions and behaviors can drain us. So how do we protect ourselves without shutting down our own compassion? I want to give you a little toolkit because you know me, I'm not just here to yammer to you about the problem. I always want to leave you with some tangible, actionable tools to help you cope with what we talk about. So here's a short but powerful little toolkit, nothing too in-depth because you can get that on my website in my self-care toolkit. Just a handful of strategies that you can keep close when you feel yourself getting sucked into overwhelm from either a toxic environment or helping someone through an emotional time. So the first one is to recognize your reaction. Understand that if you're reacting to someone's negative behavior, it's about how they acted, not about who you are. If you're carrying something heavy that isn't yours, acknowledge that. Saying it out loud can be helpful. Second is boundaries are not optional. Boundaries don't have to be about locking people out. They can also be, a little fence or a gate that helps to establish where your space or bandwidth ends and others are allowed to be. Sometimes it might mean limiting time with people who constantly dump their negativity on you, or it might be as simple as saying, I hear you, but I can't take this on right now. Boundaries are what keep your empathy from turning into burnout. The third is to ground yourself in the moment. When you feel flooded, pause. Take 3 slow breaths. I always talk about breath work here in this podcast. It's, such a fantastic tool. Feel your feet on the ground. Touch something solid, your desk, a stone in your pocket, even the arm of your chair. These little grounding rituals, for lack of a better word, remind your nervous system, I'm safe. I don't have to carry this. If you can, take even a few minutes alone time, even if that means sneaking into a bathroom stall, literally. The fourth is to learn how to build yourself a metaphysical barrier. And this one takes some practice, but it's what I call my bubble meditation, and it is a lifesaver for me at work. You can get the link for a free download of it down in the episode notes. The fifth is to create emotional separation. And this one takes practice too. When you notice an emotion rising in you that isn't yours, quietly name it. That's their sadness. That's their anger. And just that little mental label can help you avoid absorbing it into your own body. The sixth is to give yourself emotional recovery time. After being in a heavy environment, allow yourself some time to decompress. That might be a walk outside, a few minutes of quiet, journaling, listening to music that soothes you or resets your energy. Don't accept yourself to snap right back. The seventh is to build a support system. You don't have to process all this alone. Talk to someone who can hold space for you without judgment, whether it's a trusted friend, a counselor, or even your HR advisor if it's really affecting you at work. Even a short check-in can help you stop spiraling into isolation and emotions that weren't ever yours to carry. And finally, this one's a big one for me. Get out in nature more. Research has shown time and time again that time in nature is healing on a mental, emotional, and physical level. Take a stroll on the beach if there's one near you. Find some trees to walk under, or just go outside and sit on your porch or balcony for a little while without your earbuds in. Absorbing that energy from nature can help flush out some of the toxic energy that you may have picked up throughout your day. And none of these are magic fixes, but together they're like giving your emotional self a raincoat and boots before you step out into the storm. You're still showing up with empathy. You're still showing compassion, but you're not letting yourself drown in it. So if you have a notebook or paper handy today, I'm going to encourage you to really explore what we talked about today. Be kind to yourself, of course, as always, but think of the last time someone's mood or behavior upset you. Was it about how they treated you, or did you actually absorb their feelings as your own? Write down what really lingered, the event or the emotion, and what might shift if you named it with honesty. This week we talked about empathy, how to not confuse it with the buzzword empath, and ways you can protect yourself from those soul-sucking energy vampires and anxiety-triggering environments. As we wrap up, I want you to remember, being empathetic is a strength. Being an empath is a whole different experience, but they're different. And understanding the difference can help you honor your own reactions without carrying the extra weight that was never yours to hold. You don't need to carry someone else's feelings to prove you're compassionate. It's enough to honor your own. And finally, ask yourself this: what would change if I stopped labeling every emotional reaction as being an empath and instead simply named the truth? That behavior hurt me. That tone unsettled me. That silence felt cold. Because here's the magic. When you name the real thing, you can start to work with it. Thank you for being with me today. Come say hi to me on Instagram at transformativejourneys.johanna. I'd love to hear your story. If this episode helped you find language for some of the stuff you've been dealing with or helped you feel a little more seen or heard, please share it. Leave a review, send me a message, or forward it to someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps me keep creating free tools and honest conversations, because no matter how much you love what you're doing, sometimes it takes a whole lot of metaphorical duct tape to hold it all together. If you'd like to toss a little love into the duct tape fund, you can now support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell if there is one, so you never miss an episode. Until next week, this is Johanna reminding you that it doesn't matter if you fall. What matters is how well you bounce. This is Transformative Journeys. See you next time. Just wanted to throw in a disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not replace the advice of a medical or mental health expert. I'm not a licensed counselor or a therapist, just a human with a mic and a story of growth and resilience. No degree, no fancy letters after my name. I'm a full-time student at the School of Hard Knocks, University of Life, where I figure I'll graduate when I take my last breath. In other words, I'm just Johanna, a fellow human being on my journey through this thing called life, and your concierge on this transformative journey.